So a year ago, I had the opportunity to participate in a training program in Oakland that spanned a semester that was put on by a group called the Catalyst Collective. It was called the Anne Braden Anti-Racist Training for White Social Justice Organizers. It's a long title. And I traveled to Oakland 3 times for it. They were long weekends, 4 8-hour days in a row, 2 travel days on each side, once every 6 weeks over the course of a semester, with lots of reading and video watching and webinars and small group work and fundraising and research in between the sessions. So it was a real deep dive. And a lot of what I got out of it was a political education around capitalism and classism more than I did around racism and racial identity, which took me a little by surprise. I've always had a sense and some information about how capitalism and racism interlock, but it became so much more real and clear to me. And it gave me opportunities to talk about classism and my own relationship to wealth and to class. And we had caucus groups of people from different ethnicities within, we were all white, but I got to be in a Jewish identity group for a while. There was a parents group I was in. And then we also had class caucuses. And I come from an owning class background. I have class privilege, and really came to understand that in a different way than I had before. Like, really came to understand how limited I am, not materially. Obviously, materially, having access to wealth gives you lots of opportunities, but I'm really limited in my understanding of the world and of other people's experiences. And somehow, I think because you can see racial differences, it's been an easier entranceway for me to do anti-racism work than it was for me to do anti-classism work. But coming to understand that as a person with both race and class privilege, I don't have the most expertise. I don't have the most experience. And I'm the least likely to be able to find solutions to these forms of oppression than people who live with them. I'm the least likely to be able to figure out solutions because I'm somebody who's benefiting materially from these systems. And so the way that these systems work is that it's very hard to see them while you're benefiting from them. And as we've been on this journey as an organization to really do deep internal anti-racism work, I keep bumping up against class issues too, for myself personally, and my blinders about how I'm able to do this job for $40,000 a year because I don't have college debt. I have insurance from my partner's job, and my parents help me pay for my kids' needs. There is very little way that somebody who did not have those 3 things would be able to live this life, do this job, and pay for their kids to live the lives they live. So it's a tremendous privilege to be able to be here, but then there's this, this sort of, I don't know if irony is the right word, but this complicated thing where, like, I'm the one who can access this job. I can do this work and raise my family for this amount of money because of my access to privilege and to wealth. But I'm not the person who's going to solve the problem. So there's this whole, they've started talking about, we've heard the prison industrial complex and the military industrial complex. People now talk about the nonprofit industrial complex. And one of the issues with it is that it's a response to what I understand as neoliberalism, that as our government services get smaller and smaller, there's lots of nonprofits that pop up to serve different populations and different needs. But they're drawing off personal funds. And in Vermont, there's more nonprofits per capita than any other state. And there's very few wealthy people in Vermont. And there's very, very few wealthy people who are as radical as we are. So there's not a lot of funds to do the work. And when I was hired 6.5 years ago by Spence and others, one of the things, I got 2 very clear instructions from a mentor of mine, Paige Wadley Bailey, who has since passed, but she said, okay, Rachel, if you as a white person want to be working for an organization that has racial justice at its roots, and that if you want to do all the programming you do, the anti-war work, the fair trade work, all the work that you do through an anti-racist lens, I have a couple suggestions. And they were to change the bylaws so that the board would maintain 50% people of color, and to hire a racial justice advisory committee who was made up entirely of people of color, who we would pay to be a group to whom we're accountable and who sets leadership and guidance for the organization. And we did both of those things, and we've maintained those. And as we've gotten more and more invested, we've realized things like, okay, who's able to come to the Racial Justice Advisory Committee meetings? And it's a lot of people who have access to more privilege than a lot of other people. They're all people of color, so they're all experiencing racism, but we realized, okay, we need funds to be able to also, if we want it to be really open to a wide group of people around Vermont with different experiences, we need to be able to offer mileage reimbursement, and we need wage compensation so that if they're missing work, we can pay them to be there in addition to paying them their time. And we need to offer childcare stipends, and so we needed more money for that. And so there's just been a lot of recognizing that to do this work really deeply and really authentically means doing less other stuff. That to do the internal work really well means doing less external work, or somehow coming up with a lot more money, which doesn't seem to exist in Vermont, or we haven't found it yet. One of the examples of sort of my own blindness around class issues is about health insurance. That I have coworkers without health insurance, and because we live in a culture where it's sort of taboo, it is taboo to talk about money, really frankly, and where people who have a lot of money tend to be embarrassed, and people who have very little money tend to be embarrassed, and everyone pretends to be middle class, and then we never address classism because nobody wants to talk about their class. So I count myself in that category, and I did not talk directly with my coworkers about their situations with health insurance for years, and then at some point realized I was working with people who didn't have insurance and who were suffering greatly and dealing with serious health issues with no ability to get support. And I was clueless, and it seems so idiotic to say it now. Like, it really seems like, how could I have not noticed that? But that's just like one tiny example. There's just so much stuff where, hello, Vince. Welcome. Hi, Siobhan. There's seats here, or we can open up the circle, and there's snacks and tea. Come find a place to sit. Just in the middle of talking about how. No. I'm glad you came. Hi. Good. So I was talking about how I'm leaving in large part because of the class and race privilege that I have. Okay. That as a result of those identity groups and the access I have and the limitations I have as a result of those, we as an organization no longer think that I'm the best person for the job, that the organization will be much better served by somebody who is living and surviving and experiencing areas of marginalization that I'm not. That they're going to be able to go into spaces and speak more authentically. They won't speak in the third person the way I do when I'm talking about our work. And they're more likely, like I said earlier, to be able to find solutions. It's very hard to find solutions for problems that are benefiting me. I like to think I can do it, but I know I can't do it as well. And I was talking about the Ann Braden training that I did, and how, even when we did the class caucus work and when the Owning Class Caucus reported back, we ended up totally overstepping the amount of time we were given without realizing it. None of us heard that they had told us to use a certain amount of time. And so then, the middle class group went, and the working class and poor group went, and they just told us off. They were just like, we are done with this. Like, you just talked for 10 minutes and you were given 2. And we were like, what? Somebody told us we had 2 minutes? Like, we didn't even hear it. And I just, we all meant well. We're all at this anti-racism training. Like, we're good people, and we're still messing up, and that's normal. That's going to keep happening. But it would be better to have someone who's less likely to mess up in ways that are hurting the people that the organization is here to serve most. So in order to really authentically offer a job as ED of an organization, I was also talking about my salary and how the only way I'm able to raise a family with it is because I don't have college debt, I have health insurance from elsewhere, I have family support. So if we hire somebody who doesn't have access to all that, we might be setting them up for a disaster. They might last 6 months and realize, like, I need health insurance, or, you know, like, become completely emotionally burnt out from, like, not just trying to help change these systems, being part of changing these systems, but also suffering from them and surviving them, and the like amount of emotional labor that goes into it, which is really different than what I deal with when I'm working on these issues. So what I've worked out numbers wise is that we need to offer insurance, we need to increase everyone's pay rates, and we need to hire a 6th position, and each of those things costs about $30,000. And so I have worked out a formula that in order to make $90,000 additional dollars, not just what we already make, but additional, what I'm going to ask all of you is to help me brainstorm now while we're here, and to continue thinking afterward. And I have broken down a list of pledges that some of you will be able to do. Not everybody here will be able to do it, but pledges, and hoping that people will step up and say, for 3 years, I will give X amount. And I'll email that document to people, or I have a paper copy if you want it. Just really hoping that as somebody new comes in, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I think Keena's back there. You can, Dad, can you just scooch forward so they can get them? Hoping to get 3-year pledges so that as the new
We gotta do the circle.
as the new ED comes in, they don't have the stress that a lot of EDs have. Like, oh my God, are all the major donors going to leave with the ED? So we've had 2 of these receptions already, and a lot of great ideas have emerged out of them, and I'm excited to pursue some of them, and I'm really excited to hear what other ideas you all have about how do we find $90,000 more dollars. Right now our budget is $370,000, so that's a big jump. We had hired a 6th person. We had grown enough. When Spence and the board hired me 6.5 years ago, we were at the equivalent of 3 full-time positions. There were 5 of us part-time, but it was the equivalent of 3 full-time positions. Last year we got up to 5 full-time positions. We had and that was with 6 different people, most of whom were part-time. And then we ran into 2 big bumps last year. One around trans inclusion, and one around Palestinian solidarity work and our decision to join the boycott, divest, sanction movement of Israel. And we lost a lot of funding over those 2 issues. So we had hired somebody into this 6th position, which is a community engagement position that I think the organization desperately needs that person. And it didn't end up working out because she needed health insurance, and she had had a 2nd job with health insurance, and that job fell apart, and so she had to leave us after a week. Simultaneously, we reevaluated the budget and realized we couldn't afford to have the position. So now we're back down to 4.5 full-time equivalents. So we're 50% bigger. We were at 3, we're at 4.5. We're significantly bigger than we were 6.5 years ago. But we're significantly smaller than we were a year ago, which I think that everyone on the board and staff feels solid in the decisions that we made. We don't doubt them, but it hurts, it stings to not be able to do what we wanted to do. So offering health insurance is a big one, getting this 6th position is a big one, and then being able to pay people more money so that they can afford to live a little more than just making it paycheck to paycheck. So what questions or ideas do you all have? I think we can cut the video now. I'm videotaping this for people who aren't able to be here. So instead of writing up this whole spiel, they can just watch me say it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're fine.